All right, guys, I have some unfortunate news. It's just going to be me again today because Ken has left me high and dry for the third week in a row because he has just been nonstop busy. And you guys, I'm a little bit, offended at this point. Like, I don't know, is it me? What's going on? So, anyways, you're going to have to put up with me for another episode. Hopefully, he will be back next week. But we're going to be talking about today boundaries, which I am really excited about because we all need them. We need more boundaries, and it's really important for our success. So I'm excited to jump in and talk through boundaries and
Whoa,
how to
whoa,
have
whoa.
more
Hold
of
on.
them.
Marissa,
Wait,
Marissa,
wait.
why are you going to talk about boundaries? Are you just trying to kick me out of the program? Like, what are we doing
Wait,
here?
Ken, are you here?
I'm back. I'm
He is
back.
back.
Finally
Yes.
back, alive and well. I have,
I was going to talk about having boundaries, and because I felt like you were drawing a lot of strong boundaries on me, but I would much rather have this conversation together. And hopefully, we do not need to have these boundaries together. So,
no, no, no. When we said we were going to take a hiatus or a sabbatical or whatever word we want to use in the summer, I just decided to just keep going for a while. So it
hey,
was great.
well, we're excited to have you back. It definitely did not feel the same without you recording for the last couple of episodes. So, I am so excited. The gang's back together. And
It's going to be
we've
fun.
got a great new episode and lots of new episodes to come. So I am really, really excited about that.
Yes. Let's jump into it. Welcome to another episode of Focus on This, the most productive podcast on the internet so you can banish distractions, get the right stuff done, and finally start loving Mondays. I'm Ken Freire, and I'm here with Marissa Hyatt.
Hey, yo, happy Monday.
Happy Monday. It's the first
Gosh,
Monday we've been able to say that together since, I think, June?
yeah,
Maybe May.
it's been really sweet in our full focus planner community. We've had a lot of people for the last couple of months be like, our Mondays just aren't the same. I had somebody actually DM me on Instagram and they said, how am I supposed to love Mondays? They said we are not in our ears every week. So we're finally back and it feels so good. I am so excited. And speaking of our full focus planner community, this episode today actually comes directly from our community. I put up a post in the community and asked people what they wanted to hear from us, Ken. And Alice is the one who actually suggested that we do an episode about boundaries. And
Love it.
so I'm really excited to be talking. So thanks, Alice, for this recommendation. And hopefully you'll find it incredibly helpful.
I love it. I love it. So I think the thing when it comes to boundaries is that we struggle to set and keep boundaries, right? Like even with ourselves. But when we fail to do that, we fail to actually see all the possibilities and potentials that we could actually have in life. So boundaries are actually essential for our success. Am I right on
It's
that?
really true. Mm-hmm.
You might be
Yeah,
like, no,
absolutely. No,
Ken's
I
been on
think
hiatus
that,
and he's wrong.
yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. And I think it's so important for our happiness, for our success. I mean, if you can kind of think about your kids, if you are somebody who has kids or if you don't, think about the kids in your life. And if they had no boundaries, they would be wild and just, totally like feral, they would not be, they probably wouldn't be happy. Their needs likely wouldn't be getting met. And it's easy for us to realize that with kids and realize that they need boundaries in order to feel safe, to feel successful, to feel happy, all of those things to be able to have what they need to thrive. But it's really easy to forget this for ourselves as we become adults. And so today is going to be a good reminder. We've got 4 boundaries that we want to talk about today that are going to help you succeed. So let's go ahead and dive into boundary number 1, which is to say no to overwork and yes to balance. So Ken, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, I think the biggest reason that most people don't ever say no to overwork is because they actually don't know how to start and end their day. Right? So it just kind of bleeds through and they're like, oh, let me do this one more thing. Let me just check my email. Let me just check this. And they never actually know how to stop it. right? And actually have balance. I think this is why we've talked about this. And I know, Marissa, this is probably one of your favorite things out of many things that we do, but like the work startup ritual and the work day shutdown ritual
Yeah.
are so vital. Is like, how do you start the day so you know I've transitioned from my personal stuff? And then how do I close out the day? And I think for me, if I don't close out the day right, I feel like I just need to keep checking my phone, or I feel like I need to check Slack, or I need to go do other things because I actually just haven't stopped and slowed down enough to do what needs to get done.
Yeah, it's really true. Well, and I feel like having those bookends on the day, it helps us take, that period of time. It's easy to let our work bleed into our life, where we just feel like there's no clear start and stop. And that can be really frustrating to ourselves when we feel like there's just a lot of loose ends out there, or it can be frustrating to the people in our life that we're spending time with if they feel like we haven't gotten out of that mindset. And one of the biggest things that I have had to put a boundary on, most of you guys know that Full Focus was founded and started by my dad, and that my sister is our CEO. My brother in law is our chief product officer. And so it's a family business. And if I'm not careful, we can really slip into overworking simply just by talking about it outside of work hours. And this is a strong boundary that we've actually had to have as a family. And it's, easier said than done. And we have to check each other pretty frequently about this. But we have to make sure that we're putting those boundaries so that we're able to cultivate that other part of our life, or those other parts of our relationship that don't have to do with work. So it's really important to have those boundaries around your workday, and your workday startup and shutdown rituals are the perfect rituals to be able to create those boundaries.
Yeah. And one of the things that some people might be like, well, I have to do this work because I won't be able to get it done, or that I feel the pressure that needs to get done. But the reality is that, like, when you put constraints or boundaries into your life, what ends up happening is that your focus improves, the quality of your
Hmm.
work improves, and your creativity improves. And the reason why that happens is because once you put that constraint, it forces you to actually think a different way, right? If you're like, hey, I have 60 hours in the week, you're like, oh, I got time. But if you're like, I only have 40 or 30 hours to get this thing done, it makes you think about a different way to accomplish the goal, right? So you
Yeah.
want to make sure you add those boundaries in place so that it forces you to think differently about how you should do your job.
We actually have a really amazing free tool to help you guys create your rituals, and it is called Essential Daily Rituals to Transform Your Life: How to Build Daily Habits That Drive Your Success. And you can get that totally free at fullfocus.co/build-rituals. And it's such a handy tool if you've never heard of a workday startup or shutdown ritual, or you never have really implemented it successfully. This is a great tool to get you started towards that. Plus, there's some other rituals that will be incredibly helpful.
I love it. All right, let's talk about boundary number two, which is saying no to less important work and yes to my highest contribution. Marissa, why is this important?
Well, gosh, I mean, how often do we slip into what is urgent, right?
Yeah,
Like, this
quote
is,
unquote
I know.
urgent.
Yeah, exactly. What feels most urgent, whatever often is the loudest. And it's really easy to not focus on our most important work because it's just easier to do some of the other stuff. Maybe, some of those other simpler tasks are just easier to do. We can check them off faster. They kind of give us that quick dopamine hit. A lot of times it's because somebody asked us to do our other kind of work that isn't maybe our most important work. Your boss might be coming to you and saying, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And so that takes you away from that really important deep work you were trying to do. Maybe it's one of your coworkers who is asking for something from you. And so you're just kind of pulled in different directions. And then often it's because, like I said, it's urgent or it's loud. There's certainly days that we've probably all had where our email inbox or our Slack or text or Voxer, whatever you use to communicate within your kind of team setting and with your team, just feels like it's constantly crying out and asking for you to pay attention. And so it's so easy to slip away from doing that less important work. And so it's really important that we have a clear boundary here and we make sure to say yes to our highest contribution.
Yeah. And this is where setting your daily big three is really important because it confronts us with that question of what matters most. And Marissa, interestingly enough, the last few months, I've been talking to a lot of individuals who have been like overwhelmed and just stressed out. And they're just like, man, I don't know how to get out of this hamster wheel of overwhelm and burnout. And I need help. Right. And I every time I ask them, well, what's your daily big three? They're like, well, I'm not sure. And they start rattling those things off. And I'm like, is that really your highest contribution? And I start actually giving them a series of questions that they could ask to really figure out what's your daily big three. So question number one I ask is like, what's your goal for this quarter? Right.
Mm,
And this is our quarterly goal as we talk about this. But
yeah,
lots of times people don't address their daily big three and connect it with their goals.
it's
So I
so
ask
true.
them,
Yeah.
what's their quarterly goal? And then from there, I say, which of these tasks is going to get you closest to your goal?
Hmm.
It's so funny that many times they're like, I haven't actually thought about it that way because they just get focused on the urgent. And then finally, the other thing I say is which one's going to be the highest leveraged activity with the least amount of time, right?
Ooh,
So that they're like, oh, what is the easiest thing that I can do? Because sometimes, again, it feels easier to do this, check your email, check your Slack, check
right.
this other thing. But like, what's the easiest thing with the highest leverage? And the way people just start to think about that and unlocks their mind, like, oh, these are the things that I should do, right?
Yeah.
And if you're managing a team, a great question that I always ask is like, hey, which task is going to help your team succeed faster and better, right? Like
Yeah.
when they start to think that way, they're like, oh, I should do this task because it helps the team better out.
I love that. So my sister Megan, our CEO, we had a team meeting a few days ago, and she had just been at a mastermind that she participates in, and they had a speaker, and I wish I had his name pulled up, but it's the guy who wrote
The one thing,
the one thing, yeah. So the question is that he asks in this book called The One Thing is what's the one thing I can do this week that by doing it, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary? And I think
mm,
that's such a good question to ask. Obviously, he's asking this, or Megan was asking us this question within the context of a week, but you could ask it within the context of your day and make sure, whatever that answer is, that that is your number one on your daily big three and that you try to complete that first before the other two. I think that Kenny really talked about this, but I hear so often in our community that people either feel like they're just trying to check off whatever is necessary for today. They're not connecting their daily big three back to their quarterly goal. And I often hear that people feel like they sometimes need a daily big three for their personal life and for their professional
yeah,
life. And I really want to stress this that you should not need six big threes. Like that completely defeats the purpose of the daily big three. That becomes the daily big six, which is not our system, which is not what we have found in our research to be the most effective way. And I want to encourage you guys, you only need to pick three. The point is, you should not feel overwhelmed by these things. These things are the three things that you can do today that are going to move the needle the most on your most important priorities. So, whether that is related to your weekly big three, or back to your quarterly goals, this should help you move the needle. And ultimately, that's calling on your highest contribution. And so, this is such a great way to set a boundary. And so, when you get those requests that are urgent or that come up, you can gently say to those people, hey, I'd love to get to that. I have a few other important priorities today, but I'll get to that in a minute or by this time or in the next day, or I can commit to that, in whatever time frame feels comfortable to you.
yeah, I love it. One of the things that I do for me personally that's helped, and this is for those who are working. When I look at my daily big three, I like to think the two of them are going to be for work and one has to be personal,
Oh, that's
right?
good.
So that I know that I just don't miss it out. And then some days it's too personal and one work.
Right.
But like I just need to stay focused on that. And one
Yeah.
thing that I've told someone that I actually just bought a planner and they texted me and they're like, hey, I bought a planner. I'm super excited. And I said, hey, the number one biggest pitfall is that people are going to try to use it as a task manager list. It's not a task manager list.
Right.
It's a goal achievement planner.
That's really true.
Think about it as that. And they're like, oh,
Yeah,
that's really good. I'm like, yeah, if you use it as a task list, you're messing up. You're doing it wrong.
it's true.
Okay. So then that leads to boundary number 3, which is saying no to negative relationships and yes to mutual encouragement. All right. And this one, even Marissa, you and I were kind of going back and forth a little bit before recording here. But let's talk about this. Like, what do we mean and what do we not mean by this?
Well, here's what we do mean. Or sorry, here's what we don't mean, I should say. Uh, we don't mean giving up on somebody because they've stopped being useful to you or because, they might be going through a difficult or a challenging time in their life. It's really important to show up for the people that you love and that you really deeply care about. So just want to say that out of the get-go that sometimes there are challenging seasons in relationships, or someone like a good friend of yours may be going through a really difficult divorce, or they just got some challenging health diagnosis and they're kind of feeling down in the
Yeah.
dumps, like they're going through a difficult season, and they really do need your encouragement. But there are people in our lives who, generally speaking, hold us back. One of the things that my parents have said to us for a long time, as long as I can remember, really, is that you don't want to have people in your life who don't come with batteries. And I
Hmm.
love that thought because we want the people in our life to be self sufficient. Like they are coming fully equipped, they're fully resourced. And, obviously we all go through seasons and that's normal and natural and okay. But we don't want people who are just sucking our energy out. And so this can often look like, a coworker who is always negative, who's always complaining. You might have a neighbor who's, kind of that nosy neighbor who's always gossiping. And, that can feel really toxic. And then there's often, friends that we have that somehow the friendship has been soured for one reason or another, and it feels, leaves you feeling really kind of insecure, and just kind of discouraged. Every time that you hang out with that person, maybe you feel more insecure, maybe you feel like you leave their presence and you feel worse. And that's the kind of person that we're talking about, that may not be somebody that you want to continue investing in that relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. I think about the people that when you walk away from, did they, did you feel uplifted or excited? Like, man, this person I was around, I feel a lot of joy. Or was it like, gosh, this was just like, they just beat me down. They were like,
Yeah.
for an essence, they were just like bullying you, right? I remember having friends like that in high school where they just like all day long, we would make fun of each other, right? But then after a while, I'm like, is there anything else besides us just giving each other a hard time and trashing each other? Like,
Right.
do we actually know what's really going on? And high school is probably a bad example because we all felt like we were going
Right.
through that. But it shows that we want to make sure we are in relationships that matter enough.
Yeah.
So if you do have relationships that are holding you back, there's a couple of things that you could do. Number one, you could just confront them, right? Like if you think that it's worth keeping, confront them about it and be like, hey, how do we change this dynamic? How do we actually deepen the relationship? Or especially for guys, like we like to sometimes just give each other a hard time, or it's like, no, we could give each other a hard time and we got to encourage one another, right? Yesterday, I went out to dinner with a group of friends, and we like to joke around. It's a small group from my church. We joke around a lot. Marissa knows my humor quite a bit, probably better than most people at work.
Yeah.
Um, but then, like at the end of the day, we were just encouraging one another, and it was just like so uplifting. I was like,
Mm,
"Oh man, I never thought you saw me that way," and I
right.
just walked away like I was on cloud nine, right? So like, you want those people, but if you don't have those people, confront them, right?
Yeah.
And then if it doesn't work out at some point, you could either distance yourself from them, right? You don't have to like completely disown them and exile them, right? Or
Yeah.
some people you may just need to let go if they're really toxic, right? And you're just
Mhm.
like, I can't do this anymore. It's better for you and your family that you don't have those kind of relationships around.
Well, and I think this is a really good time too to analyze and kind of like self reflect and ask yourself, could I be one of these people?
Yeah.
Like, am I someone that adds more joy and encouragement to the people in my life. And so when I'm with people, do they leave my presence feeling more energized or do they feel drained? And this is kind of a gut check for all of us. And there's probably times where we, feel really great and, feel like we're just contributing great to the relationships in our life. And then there's other times where we feel like we're just not. And it's important if you notice that behavior to kind of analyze yourself and to ask, if you have a trusted friend or a spouse, to keep you accountable to that and just say, this is something I'm really working on in my life. And it's important to me that I am a positive presence within my relationships. And, if you notice me kind of continually complaining or gossiping or doing some of these things that are just, having degrading humor with people or something that doesn't feel good, um, let me know. Like, I'm going to ask you to keep me accountable to that. And I think that that can be a great way too for us not only to make sure that we're drawing a boundary with other people, but also drawing that boundary with ourselves, which in turn is just going to invite more of that positive presence within our relationships. If we show up that way, it's going to be more likely that other people are going to feel, better to do the exact same.
Yeah, and I would love to say that, Marissa, for those who might have friends, I'm using Marissa as an example, who there's an individual who likes to joke around more than the other. You setting a boundary is important. I think like Marissa is great at this. Every once in a while, I'll say something. She's like, too far, too far. Well, that's super helpful, right?
Right.
Because now I know, like, oh, okay, I got to keep that in check. If she didn't say that, I probably could just keep going on and ruin our relationship
Right.
by not ever knowing where the boundary is. So boundaries are actually super healthy for a relationship
Yeah.
because you know where you can play, right?
Right, exactly. It gives people the opportunity to actually win with you.
Yep.
While it can feel discomfort, or uncomfortable to say your boundaries and to communicate those to people, it gives them, the play to be able to win. Like if
Yeah.
they don't know what the boundaries are, it's going to be really difficult for them to win with you. And so if you can just say, hey, like I'm not actually going to enter into this kind of a conversation any longer. It feels really gossipy to me, like, and I'm really trying to work on that. Um, that person might be caught off guard initially, but they might go, oh, okay, well now I know that that's off limits, and here's how I know to actually win when I'm with
Yeah.
that person.
I love it. All
All
right.
right, let's go on to boundary number 4, which is to say no to late nights and to say yes to rest of days. And I know if you're anything like me and Ken, this can be a challenging one. But what we're really talking about today with these boundaries is making sure that you're drawing boundaries to set you up for the most successful day possible. And this is a great strategy. So, Ken, why don't you talk about this? Because I know this is challenging for you.
Yeah. I am naturally a night owl. And it's so easy for me to just be like, okay, I'm just going to stay up another hour, but while everybody's asleep. But then when it ends up happening is I'm just exhausted the morning beforehand because my kids are going to wake me up, all that stuff. So we actually have to set the boundary where we feel rested and we have enough rest and energy so that we could be fully present and give our 100% both for our families and at work. Right.
Yeah.
So we have to realize that it's not just kids who need bedtimes, right? The reality is that consistency improves the quality of our sleep.
Yeah.
Right. So the more consistent the bedtime is, and we're going to bed at 9 or 10, whatever it is, the better off you are because you get more rest and your body finds that rhythm that it needs so that it could get enough sleep. Right. And you
Yeah.
wake up energized and ready to rock and roll.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we have to all of us have to recognize is that sleep is the foundation of everything else. Like if you don't have enough sleep, it's brutal. I'll give you a great example. My father, he has Parkinson's disease,
Mm.
and he's had it now for a long time. But for the last 8 years or so, he's had insomnia. So he only sleeps like 2 or 3 hours a night. And there are some nights he doesn't get any sleep, and it is absolutely brutal. And he said to
Mm.
me, Ken, the worst thing about all of the sicknesses I've had is not being able to sleep because
Oof.
it's just exhausting. And some of you know this, right? If you've had kids or something like that, if you did like 3 days of like only 3 hours of sleep, you're wiped out. You're done.
Yeah.
Imagine 8 years, right? Uh,
Gosh.
but we do this to ourselves all the time. It might not feel that way, but we do it in long-term cycles where we're like, oh, you know what? I'm going to go to sleep at midnight and now we're going to wake up at 6 and I'm going to do next day, you do 1 o'clock and wake up at 7. Like you keep messing up your rhythm where your body doesn't know how to catch up. And little by
Yeah.
little, most of you probably are working in like 70, 80% capacity just because you're not resting. And I made that
It's
statistic up. So
Well, I mean, it really is true. And I mean, we all feel it. Like whenever you have a bad
yeah,
night's sleep, you feel it the next day. And I feel like this can be challenging because you are exhausted. It's very normal for us in our world today to want to veg out at the end of the night and just kind of check out. We want to, put on another episode of whatever show we're binging, which I'm binging The Bear right now and loving it. It's a conversation for another
it's
time.
on my list. It's on my list.
Definitely not the most relaxing show by any means. But I'm personally binging that, and every night, it's like, okay, I just want to have, an episode, and maybe it turns into two, and then I want it to turn into three or whatever. It's like, whoa, you gotta rewind that. Or often, we want to get to the end of the night and have a glass of wine and just or a bowl of ice cream or whatever the thing is that helps us feel calm and chill and, like we can just kind of check out. And none of that actually sets you up for a restful night's sleep. And so I want to encourage you, if this is an area where you feel like you need to focus on, that you go read the book Sleep Smarter by Sean Stevenson. It is one of the best books, I think, out there on this topic. And he goes into all the science behind sleep and its importance and how specifically, it's a very practical book, how you can set yourself up for a fantastic night's sleep and what he calls, I think he calls it sleep hygiene, how to have really good sleep hygiene. And this is not something that we often learn. This is something that we kind of have to end up teaching. And the world, that we live in, certainly with technology, is against us in this. Our team right now is actually, we just finished the book Miracle Mornings, and we are doing a 30-day challenge as a team for Miracle Mornings. And one of the things that he talks about in this book is a fantastic book. My dad and Megan interviewed Hal Elrod, who is the author of this. I think the episode should be coming out in October. So you guys be on the watch for that for the Double Win show. But he talks about the power of having a really strong evening ritual and how that's, arguably just as important as your morning ritual because it helps set you up for a great day and a great morning the next morning. And one of the things that was really profound to me that he talks about is how whatever our last thought is often our first thought the next day. And so whatever we go to bed thinking, we tend to wake up thinking. And so he has a process for helping you release kind of those ruminating thoughts that a lot of us get at the end of the day, especially if you're, a high achiever or, you're in a leadership position. It's very easy for us at the end of the day to just be going through that to-do list. Oh my gosh, I forgot to talk about this, or I need to make sure I talk to so-and-so tomorrow. And we're kind of going through that checklist, or it's often that our brain goes to anxiety at this time of night. We start to get fearful and worry about the future. And one of the things that he has you say to yourself at the end of the day is, my only job right now is to prepare myself for restful sleep. Like there's no obligation to get anything done, to solve any problems, to make sure I don't forget anything. Like my only responsibility in this moment is to prepare myself for a restful night. So, if you have not read Miracle Mornings, highly recommend it. It's been a big game changer for our team and for me personally. I've just really, really enjoyed it. But how he talks about evening rituals is really powerful.
I love it. So the two books you've mentioned so far are Sleep Smarter and Miracle Mornings.
Yes. Yeah. And
Great
they're
books.
so good. Ken, I'm curious, do you have any kind of a evening ritual, or is it kind of like shut the TV off and like brush your teeth and go straight to bed?
I would say I have a ritual, but it's not a good ritual. If you
Yeah.
think about that, we all have rituals on how we do it. And I'll ebb and flow. I would say right now, my ritual has been brush my teeth, lay down, um, scroll through TikTok or Instagram, and then I start dozing off, but
Yeah.
that's one of the things that as the team was going through this book, like, okay, I got to reset. I even bought like a reading light for myself
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
because I love to read, but my wife is sleeping. So then I'm like, okay, well, I need
Right.
something. So I'm not using my phone. So that's one of the new rhythms that I'm going to add is like, before I go to bed, I'm just going to
That's
read
good.
a book,
Yeah.
So that's my plan, at least.
That's
We'll see
good.
how I execute.
That's really good.
The
Yeah.
community could keep me on check in like 3 weeks
Yeah.
when this thing comes out.
Well, I know. I feel like the evening ritual is one that I'm constantly like tweaking and working on and just trying to figure out what's going to be the most effective. And similarly, I have a one of the Hatch alarm clocks. If you're familiar or not with those, they're the ones that wake you up with like the light instead of noise. I mean, you can do noise with it as well, but it's like kind of mimics the sunrise. Um, and at night, you can turn on a red light, and that's the only kind of light that doesn't disturb your melatonin production. And so, red light, you can change your light bulbs in your room, like your bedside table, to red light bulbs, or you can get an actual red light. And I have been putting that on typically about 30 minutes before I go to bed, and I will like not allow myself to put on any other light within my bedroom or bathroom outside of that. And it's definitely dark, but it kind of helps me like shift, like we talked about the workday startup and shutdown rituals and how that's kind of a signal to your brain that you're shutting down work and you're moving on to the rest of your life. And I feel like that red light is a cue for my brain of like, okay, now it's time to go shift from all the things you've done today to resting, and it's been really helpful. And so I do that. Y'all know I've probably talked about this on here. And I feel like it's my personal mission to get everybody to buy one, but is an acupressure mat. Don't knock it until you try it. But it is basically a mat that you lay down on, like you put your back on, and it's spiky and has all these, spiky little things that help your body calm down. And it's like about 15 seconds of like, I wouldn't even say pain, but it feels uncomfortable. And then your body settles in, and it is like the most relaxing thing ever. And so that with my red light, I usually have some essential oils on and a little calming music. And I usually try to like breathe or meditate during that time on my mat. Just even doing that for like 5 or 10 minutes really shifts my evening ritual. So definitely do whatever makes sense for you, whatever feels good to you, feels restful to you, and is going to help you transition into that evening so that you can really wake up feeling refreshed and energized for the day ahead.
Marissa, I'm just amazed that you could do all those things with the light off and not fall asleep, because I will for sure pass out within 2 minutes of that.
I'm telling you, the acupressure mat, I don't know if I could. I mean, I maybe could. I've definitely dozed off, but I haven't like fully ever fallen asleep, because the second you move on that mat, it'll wake you up. So,
Is that
yeah.
acupuncture mat on your bed or you're on the floor?
I do it on my bed, and I actually do it to where I put my legs up on the wall, which has a whole other host of relaxing benefits and all kinds of things for your nervous system. So I usually put that on my bed, like close to my headboard, put my legs up on the wall. I've got music on, little essential oil in my red light, and I usually just do deep breathing. Sometimes I'll put on like an actual guided breathing exercise or guided meditation for sleep. And but often I just will lay there and breathe or whatever, and just kind of like empty all the thoughts for the day. And it's so helpful. Like I don't fall asleep, but it's only 5 or 10 minutes, so it's not very long.
Oh,
And
got it.
then I
I
pass
thought it
out
was like
pretty
30
quickly.
minutes. I was like, dang,
No,
I would be like, I'm out.
no, I have done it longer, and it's definitely difficult. Yeah, like it's hard at that point. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Well, great tips.
All right, let's quickly review our boundaries. So, 4 boundaries to help you succeed. Our boundary number 1 is to say no to overwork and yes to balance. Boundary number 2, say no to less important work and yes to my highest contribution. Boundary number 3, no to negative relationships and yes to mutual encouragement. And boundary number 4, say no to late nights and yes to rested days. All right, guys. Well, this was a fantastic episode. I'm so glad that Ken was back with us. And thanks so much for joining us on Focus on This.
This is the most productive podcast on the internet, so please share it with your friends and be sure to join the Full Focus Planner community on Facebook so you can benefit from the creativity and encouragement of people chasing big goals just like you.
And we're going to be here with another great episode next week, actually talking about AI. So we're going to be talking about all about your goal achievement and how to use AI to help you do that. So it's going to be a great episode.
All right. Until then, stay
focused.